Ever get that feeling? Like some people just, they walk into a room and bam, instant drama.
Absolutely.
Like they're a magnet for narcissists, energy vampires, you know the type.
Yeah, those folks.
And we're diving deep into that today, figuring out why it happens and, more importantly, how to break free.
It's a question that's got a lot of layers to unpack, and it might surprise you to learn. A lot of it goes back to childhood.
So we're talking formative years, those early experiences. This is where it all begins.
Exactly. Imagine growing up in a place where manipulation is just like the everyday routine. Maybe it's a parent with a guilt trips or a sibling always hugging the spotlight.
It becomes your normal, right?
Sadly, yes. As messed up as it sounds, that environment, it becomes your baseline.
It's like our author described it, constantly tiptoeing on eggshells, never knowing when the other shoe's going to drop.
That's a great way to put it. It's almost like your subconscious that starts expecting those dynamics, even in adult relationships where you could have something healthier.
So even when we're presented with options, a chance for something better, a part of us still craves that familiar chaos.
It's wild, isn't it? Even if that familiarity isn't good for us.
It reminds me of how some people describe leaving a controlling relationship like they're overwhelmed by the freedom.
Right. Because it's so unfamiliar, it's almost scary.
Which brings us to this whole energetic payoff idea that even in the bad relationships, those toxic dynamics, there's a part of us getting a reward out of it.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Even with a manipulative person, you might get those moments, however brief, where you please them, where you feel needed.
Oh, I see. So it's like we get addicted to those crumbs of approval, even when we know deep down it's not good for us.
It's a powerful feedback loop.
Yeah.
And it often goes back to those early experiences where those needs, they weren't met consistently.
It's like in that experiment with the babies. Have you seen that? The still face experiment?
Yes, it's heartbreaking.
For those who haven't seen it, it's where caregivers, they go emotionally blank with their babies. And you see the distress, it's clear as day.
It shows just how deep that need for connection goes, how much we crave validation from day one, and when it is missing early on.
It creates this pattern, this constant searching for it in all the wrong places.
You've got it, even if it means attracting people who just reinforce that feeling of not being good enough.
So, how do we stop the cycle? If we're practically wired for this, where do we even start? It's like we're stuck on this track, and we keep hitting replay on these old patterns.
It's easy to feel that way for sure, but it's not about hitting the brakes. It's more about like gently steering in a new direction.
I like that. So, less about stopping everything and more about shifting our focus.
Exactly. And it's tempting to try and change other people, right?
Oh, I know that trap all too well.
But the real work, it's internal. It's about understanding our own patterns, those early experiences, and healing those old wounds.
So, it's an inside job, not about waiting for someone else to change. It's about us.
You got it. And one thing that really helps is this idea of individuation.
Individuation. Okay, now we're getting into the big words.
It sounds fancy, but really it's about breaking free from those expectations. The ones maybe our parents, society, whoever put on us.
Like those old tapes we keep playing in our heads.
Exactly. And I love this example from the book. Imagine you're making cookies, right? Your mom's famous chocolate chip recipe.
Ooh, cookies. I'm already there.
But here's the thing. You secretly can't stand raisins.
Raisins in cookies, that's a crime.
Right. So individuation is like finally having the guts to bake those cookies your way, raisin free and delicious, even if it throws some people.
It's about owning your recipe, even if it's different from what you're taught.
Yeah, it's just about recognizing your needs, your desires, and going for it, even if it means ruffling some feathers, even if it challenges the status quo.
And that can be scary, right? Because sometimes we worry about disappointing people or rocking the boat. So it's about being self-aware and not selfish.
Exactly. And a big part of that is setting boundaries, which I know for those of us who are recovering people pleasers, it can feel almost impossible.
Oh, tell me about it. Setting boundaries. It's like my kryptonite.
It is tough. It's about reclaiming your power, learning to say no without drowning in guilt. And this is where things get real, the self reflection, the inner war. It all comes together here.
So where do we even begin? It feels like a lot to unpack sometimes.
It's a journey, but awareness is always the first step. Take a moment, think about your own life, your relationships, see any patterns, any common threads.
It's like noticing the recurring characters in our own personal drama, isn't it?
Exactly. Once you see the patterns, you can start figuring out what needs you were trying to meet in those situations.
And this is where finding your people comes in, right? That high vibe tribe the author talks about.
Yes, having that supportive community, it makes all the difference. People who get it, who model healthy relationships, who cheer you on.
Your own personal cheer squad for personal growth. I love it.
Exactly. Because let's be real, this stuff is hard work.
It is. Now, the author also talks about connecting with our inner child. And I think for some people that might sound a little, I don't know,
A little more, whoa,
maybe a little, but I'm curious to hear more.
totally. It sounds abstract, but really it's about that part of us, the one who remembers feeling left out or craving our parents' approval.
We all have that inner child, that younger version of ourselves.
And that part of us still carries those hurts, those unmet needs. If we ignore them, they're going to keep impacting us, even if we don't realize it.
So we have to acknowledge those parts of ourselves, those younger versions of us.
Exactly.
Give them the love, the validation they might have missed out on.
Become our own source of safety and security. It's a beautiful thing.
It's like we become the parent we always needed, that source of love and support, but for ourselves.
Exactly. And the author actually talks about this really interesting technique. It's called the frame technique, and it's meant for exactly this kind of inner feeling.
The frame technique. Okay, tell me more about that.
So basically, you imagine this protective, like energetic bubble around you.
Yeah.
It's about strengthening that sense of self, knowing where you end and someone else begins.
Setting those boundaries we were talking about.
Yes, and it uses visualization to really help you embody that. And what's cool is it encourages you to revisit those top experiences from the past, but with this new lens of self-compassion.
So it's not about erasing the past, it's about reframing it.
Exactly. And as you shift those internal patterns, those old tapes, you naturally start attracting different people, different experiences in your life.
So the internal work, it actually impacts our external reality.
It's all connected.
It's like we're finally tuning into a different channel, one that's broadcasting self-love and healthy boundaries. And suddenly, we're attracting a whole new set of characters into our lives.
I love that analogy. And here's the thing. You become less reactive to other people's stuff, their moods, their drama, because you realize it's about them, their own struggles.
It's not that we don't care, it's that we develop this inner strength, this groundedness, so we're not so easily swayed by everything around us.
Right. You learn to stay centered in your own energy, even when things are chaotic. And guess what? When you do that, those energy vampires, those manipulators, they don't stick around as much.
We can't handle our new vibe.
Exactly. Or if they do show up, you're able to see them clearly, interact from a more aware place without getting sucked in.
We become the masters of our own energy, attracting relationships that actually resonate with who we are.
That's the goal.
This has been an amazing conversation. We've covered so much ground, from childhood wounds to practical steps for healing. But one last question before we go for this powerful, if our subconscious can attract all this stuff, even the negative, what does that say about our potential to create positive change?
Oh, that's a big one.
Could we use that same power to manifest our dream relationships, our ideal careers, just a happier, more fulfilling life.
I think that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think it speaks to a truth that we often forget. We have way more agency than we realize.
Yeah.
Our beliefs, our expectations, they shape our reality.
Even the ones we don't realize we have, those subconscious patterns.
Exactly. So imagine if we brought those to the surface, challenged the ones that don't serve us, and rewrote them with a more empowered perspective. Who knows what we could create?
It's like we have this incredible power within us just waiting to be unleashed.
I love that energy.
This has been an amazing deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
My pleasure. It's been a joy.
And to all our listeners out there, remember, the power to create the life you want, it lies within you.
Mm.
Until next time.